Hi guys, thank you for watching this video. Today, as I'm sure you've noticed by the title, I'm going to be reviewing the 50th anniversary edition of Abbey Road, which just came out on the 26th of September. Now, I'm a big Beatles buff, and I know that there are thousands of you out there, if not millions and millions, and therefore much of what I have to say today you may agree with or you may disagree with, so please feel free to comment. If you could, please like the video and please subscribe to my channel. This is not normally something I do. I don't normally do reviews. However, when asked recently by friends, family, what would be your mastermind subject? Now mine, as I'm sure many of you will agree, would be the Beatles. Absolutely love them. They have had such a huge impact upon my life, and are actually in fact the reason why I am a writer, why I'm a poet and a songwriter especially. And you can check out some of that stuff on my YouTube channel if you're interested. But today I'm going to be looking specifically at the Abbey Road Deluxe Free LP Edition. Now, I chose to get this over the Super Deluxe Edition because I'm a huge fan of vinyl. And in my personal opinion, please feel free to disagree, I feel that vinyl is the best way to listen to the Beatles. In fact, when Sgt. Pepper came out in 2017, I got it on vinyl. When the White Album came out last year, I got the vinyl deluxe set of that, and this to me just finishes off the collection really nicely. It's wonderful, until we get any more, that is. And this is the way in which I want to celebrate this album, and that is on record. Okay, so as you can see, today I'm going to be talking about this particular edition, but I will be making reference to some of the others. And the reason for that being is that I've always decided against the Super Deluxe editions, as wonderful as they are, and they do have those lovely books and lots of information contained within them. The reason that's always put me off is that there isn't a vinyl contained within those. It's such a shame they didn't do the whole thing. And why do I bring up that slight negative? Solely because in this review I'm going to be making notes of the things that I think are really positive about this, and also things that I think could have been done better. Again, of course, this is all just subjective and just my opinion, so please, again, feel free to comment and disagree. I'm very, very interested to hear other people's opinions. Now, as you see, it comes in one of these big fancy boxes, a lot like the White Album edition that came out last year, and it's absolutely beautiful. You get the front cover as we all know it and love it, and on the back it's exactly the same as you would expect from the traditional record that we know and love and have known and loved for 50 years. The only major differences being that there's a lot more tracks listed on the back, and there's a good reason for that, because in this set we've got a number of absolutely wonderful outtakes, all of which of course you get on the CD edition as well, the double deluxe CD edition, so you can listen to it that way if that's what you prefer. I always collect the Beatles CDs myself because I love listening to them in the car, but when at home, vinyl all the way. Now I'm going to open the box. I'm not going to unpack it. As you can see, I've already opened it. I'm not going to unpack it and show you the packaging that it came in, but let's just say it was well protected. I always find that that's a little bit of a kind of boring way to start. And plus the excitement for me of unwrapping something is a bit of a personal thing. So let's just get straight into it. The first thing you find within the free LP edition is this 4-page pamphlet, if you will. And again, completely unlike the Super Deluxe edition, you don't get a huge book, you don't get a huge amount of information with regards to the album itself, but what you do get is actually quite thorough, considering it is, like I said, only 4 pages. You get a history about the album, how it was made, and more importantly, most notably for me, you get a load of information about the outtakes, which are actually fascinating because many of these you may or may not have heard before. I know there are a number that you might have heard on the anthology sets. However, this goes into so much more detail, but I'll get onto that in a minute. First and foremost, within the box itself, you get Giles Martin's remix. And at first glance, it looks identical, as it should, to any Abbey Road pressing that you would have seen over the last 50 years. The cover, identical, even the back is identical. You'll see here alongside it, I've got the 2012 George Martin mix. Wonderful mix in itself. The only difference being on the sleeve is that this actually makes note of when it was made, right at the bottom of the jacket. This doesn't make any reference whatsoever. Well, as far as I can see anyway. And also on the spine, no indication that this is the anniversary edition. In fact, it would be very easy to, if you weren't being slightly savvy, it'd be very easy to model these two up if you weren't sure. And to me, that's a real positive. And again, I will be talking about kind of positives and negatives within this set. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about the mix. I'm sure you've heard it by now. But one thing I will say, if I compare these two, is that the pressing, the mix itself that Giles Martin has done on this album is absolutely wonderful. Now, many of you might argue, and in fact I did prior to this coming out, that why do we need a remix of Abbey Road? To me, out of the entire Beatles catalogue, this is the one album I believe that really stands the test of time. Now, all of the Beatles records, let me just clarify, do stand the test of time in terms of the tunes themselves. However, in terms of production, this is the one album I feel you could very easily consider to be a 2019 album. Now, this mix by the late great George is wonderful, and if you play that, you wouldn't. If you played that to someone, they wouldn't necessarily know that it was made in 1969. The only difference being with this particular edition is that it's quite quiet. It's quite a quiet pressing, quite a quiet mix, and perhaps could have been done slightly better. I'm not entirely sure. I do actually really like this one, so I don't want to be too critical. And obviously George Martin produced this for all the remasters that came out in 2012 to accompany the 2009 CDs. This, however, the sound quality is absolutely superb. Best way to listen to it, for me, is through a pair of headphones. You'll hear things that you've never heard before. Vocals, instruments, they're all brought to the forefront. The separation between individual tracks is just absolutely superb. And really, you wouldn't know that this wasn't made this year. It is that good. I really do love the mix, and yet at the same time, it's not too far away from this record here. It's not too far away at all. A lot of people get a little bit scared, a little bit skeptical, going, well, we don't really want too much change. There's no need for change. I think what Giles has done is really been respectful of the original mix, but simply just brought it slightly up to date. Now, in terms of production within the 60s, this album stands out for me anyway, on the basis that it was done on 8-track recording equipment in comparison to a lot of the earlier albums. So therefore, the equipment that the Beatles themselves were using was a lot more advanced, and therefore that's why you really get this sound. So again, a lot of people could have said, do we really need a remix of it? I think it's a nice thing that we've done this after 50 years. A record of this quality deserves the attention it gets, and hence why it's number one in the charts again, which is something that makes me really happy, as I'm sure it does you. But anyway, there's that. I don't want to go again into much more detail. Please listen for yourself, and I'm sure you'll notice all the things that I do. The major reason to buy this set, however, is for the outtakes. Now, if you, like me, have the Sgt. Pepper Deluxe Edition and the White Album Deluxe Edition, you're obviously quite accustomed to the fact that Giles likes to put on a number of outtakes to really introduce you to how the album itself came to be as fascinating and as fabulous as it is. Okay, but what you get here, and this is one of one of the major positives that I'm going to get before I even get into grips with the actual presentation, etc. What you get here, unlike, in my opinion, the Sgt. Pepper and the White Album box, is you get a collection of edits and tracks that you will listen to again and again. I've actually already found myself listening to on a number of occasions, much like you would the traditional record. And that's because it really does showcase how tight a band these four guys were. Some of the alternate outtakes are almost as good, if not better, than some of the tracks we later hear on an album. And I know that's a bold statement, but what you get, what you listen to, I'll give you one example. There's a long edition of the long one, as they call it, what we know as the melody on side B, which is absolutely beautiful, and you could listen to that and enjoy it just as much as the one that we are all used to. The only differences being that there's a lack of orchestra, some of the instruments are missing, some of the harmonies are different, and the most notable being that Her Majesty, for example, is sandwiched in the middle. Very, very interesting to listen to that, and in fact I would recommend listening to that just as much as you would listen to the traditional one. So that's really why this is worth having. You will listen to this almost as much as you would listen to any regular Beatles LP. My opinion, of course, but feel free to disagree. Looking at the actual record itself, what you get, and this is one of the negatives, for me at least, what you get is you get this, what I would consider to be a standard single LP case, which has been made slightly bigger. Now, I've not come across this myself before. I'm sure it's been made. There have been many records like this, but I've never owned one myself. But so you've got this single, if you can see that, this single sleeve for two records, and the two records are presented inside with all the outtakes on, as mentioned. Now that's the real negative for me, and that being that the sleeve itself is slightly too large. I would have preferred, I'm sure many of you will agree with this, I would have preferred a gatefold sleeve. I think they missed a trick slightly with this. A gatefold sleeve would have protected the albums much better. You could have also had the option of putting in more of these, outtake images, if you will, from their walk across Abbey Road, and you could have put that in the centre. I think that would have been wonderful. And the main reason that I have a gripe with this particular jacket is that for some reason it takes on a little bit of damage. And this is in fact the second copy that I've bought. Now, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I'm somewhat OCD when it comes to my vinyls. Yeah, I like them to be as perfect as possible, and when I go into a record shop, I pick out the best edition that I can find. No creases, no marks, no nothing. However, that's impossible to do when you buy a box set like this, because they come pre-wrapped. You cannot look inside unless you really beg the shop assistant, which in this case I did have to do. But the reason why I don't like it is, as you can see here, it's very small, but both the edges of the record here have been slightly scuffed and slightly crushed almost. And there's a bigger reason for that, which is somewhat disappointing. Again, this is something I think could have been avoided if it was put into a gatefold sleeve. However, this is what they went for. And yeah, as you can see, the corners are a little bit scruffed, which annoys me slightly. I like my records to be in perfect condition. And the point about that, the reason why I'm making that point is I'll show you. When you put the two records in, let's put it with the pamphlet as well, you'll notice, very difficult to see from here I know, but you push down slightly and there is a gap. Unlike the White Album box set where everything was completely flush, the box itself was almost made to the inch in terms of the contents. This, however, has not been, and you can see there that you could almost fit in fact you can fit in another single LP to sit on top of that. And I find that a little bit disappointing. I know it's slightly pedantic. I'm fine with being called that. But the reason being is that when you receive the set, can you hear? Well, you can't really hear, but I can hear. The records themselves are moving back and forwards within the box. Now, most people will display their record like that, in a record case or on a shelf. And what you'll find is that moving in and out to take it out, to play it, whatever, you'll find that the records are still bashing about inside the box. And that to me is what caused that tiny bit of damage. I know it's really, really small, but it's something that I think is just completely unnecessary and wasn't needed. But I did have a way of combating that. Now, I said I didn't want the Super Deluxe Edition. I wasn't interested in that, as wonderful as it is. And again, I'm sure there's tons of you that disagree with me. What I wanted was the free LP edition. And because I think these are just absolutely wonderful, I wanted the picture disc to go alongside it. Now, a lot of people do actually complain about the boxes that these come in, but I quite like them. And actually, you know, I hate to say it, this is actually more sturdy than the jacket or sleeve that the bonus tracks come in, believe it or not. But this is what you get. You get the picture disc, and it's exactly the same record that you find in the individual pressing. Exactly the same contents held within it. But many of you, like me, will probably buy it because you love the image. I mean, I can't think of anything better than seeing the picture go around when you're listening to the record. And I got the Sgt. Pepper one as well. One of the reasons why I would always suggest don't just singly get this is, as we all know, picture discs can take on a little bit of damage over time if you overplay them. So, you know, I think it's all very well and good having this. This is wonderful. It's a collector's item for the future. It's limited edition. Listen to it once in a while, but maybe listen to it one in every 5-10 times you listen to the album. And by doing that, you'll avoid losing any of the picture quality that's actually on the record itself. But I wasn't here to review this. I'm just saying the reason really why this came in handy and the reason why I decided to include this within this review is that, going back to the point I was making about this box being too big, one of the things you can do, if like me, is you can stick the picture disc on top inside. All of a sudden your records are flush within the case, so when you put the lid on, nothing shakes about, and it looks absolutely wonderful, keeps everything in perfect condition. Now, I mentioned one of the negatives about the bonus tracks. Obviously, I think they're absolutely wonderful. Two of the songs you do get on there is you do get a version or a variation of the Ballad of John and Yoko, and you also get Old Brown Shoe, which are the A and B sides of the single that would have been released around the same time as Abbey Road, if not just before. One thing that really bothers me about this is, as good as those outtakes are, and they are, please listen to them for yourself because I think you will enjoy them just as much as I did. But I don't understand why. I feel like it's a missed trick that on these anniversary editions we don't get the polished singles contained within the album. Now that could have been that could have really just been put on that 2 LP edition that I mentioned earlier. Sgt. Pepper I know was a slightly different case, whereby I know they did Strawberry Fields and they did Penny Lane. Giles remixed those. He did an absolutely wonderful job. They were included on the deluxe CD. And there was also a single version, which I'm very lucky to own, that was released around the same time as that. There were, only a few that were, in the public domain. There weren't a great deal of numbers of those, so if you were lucky at the time to get one, fantastic. I was lucky at the time. You can still kind of get them online if you shop about. A little bit more expensive now, obviously, but that's wonderful. And that got me thinking, why did they not produce the single for the White Album. So that would have been Hey Jude, Revolution, which obviously you get a version of Revolution on the White Album in itself, but you don't get the fast version. That was never contained on the album, and it's a lovely story if you know about it, as to why we got to the fast version in the first place. So I think, you know, again, missed a trick there. Could have produced the single as a accompaniment to the record itself. And also here with Abbey Road, it would have been really nice to get those proper single remastered remixed editions as well with it. So the Ballad of John and Yoko and Old Brown Shoe. But that's just me. I would have really loved to see that. Also, I love an EP. Maybe I'm a little bit special in that sense. I love an EP, and it would be really great to see the EPs re-released as time moves forward for the future. But anyway, so this is the Abbey Road free LP box set. I would really highly recommend that you get it. If you're someone who prefers the deluxe edition, you prefer having things on CDs, there's a number of different copies that you can have here. But for me, it was all about the record, so therefore I got this set and I got the picture disc, as I mentioned earlier. It's a wonderful record. I will be later on doing a review of my Beatles records, and I will be listing them from worst, not a word you can use with the Beatles, but I'll use it in this case, worst to best. I will be creating that video a little bit later on, so please watch out for that. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to like, comment, or even better, subscribe, because there will be more Beatle related reviews coming shortly. Cheers.